Hi, my name is Amanda Gleason, and I am with the VIP Center for Businesswomen. And if you've been following us, you know that we have a VIP Center bookstore. And in this bookstore, we house items from local female authors who write about inspiration or personal development. And I like to promote those authors through interviews. And today I have with me Kathy Miller. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, Amanda.
So glad you are with us today. So let me tell you a little bit about Kathy, and then I will introduce her new book. So Kathy is the author of Steel Toes and Stilettos, and I have a copy of it right here. So I love the cover of this book, and I love the chapter titles too, by the way. I was just flipping through those this morning and thinking about how creative that was. So let me get to Kathy's introduction. So Kathy is a senior operations executive who has held numerous global vice president and director roles, both in manufacturing and lean enterprise leadership. Kathy is a Shingo Prize recipient for large business as a plant manager. She started her career in operations as a 17-year-old co-op student at a vehicle assembly plant and progressed through engineering, marketing, lean manufacturing, and operations leadership roles, working for 4 large publicly traded corporations in executive roles. And what you've done, Kathy, with this awesome experience is turn that into this book. You've parlayed some of your experience into this book, but also you are now going out and helping companies with their leadership development and processes within their plants. So, so happy again that you're with us today, and I'm very excited to talk about your book. So why don't you first tell me just a little bit more about you and what was the inspiration for putting this very special story into a book?
Okay, well, as my bio said, I have spent many years in manufacturing. I literally started working in a vehicle assembly plant at the age of 17 as a co-op student. And I have been in and around manufacturing plants and businesses for a number of decades now, helping lead the operations and many of the support functions, including business transformations. So I have daughters that I raised. I'm married. I hate the question whenever you're in a team setting and they say, "Tell us what you do for fun." And for me, for many years, my answer was email and laundry. That was about all I had time for. And, I studied engineering and business, and that all came very, very much in handy for me, through the different executive positions that I held. But I also always wanted to study psychology. So it was on my bucket list, and I just decided that, it was time to fulfill that dream. I know some people have more exciting dreams than that, but for me, that was something that I felt was unfinished business. And I went back to school and studied the science of human flourishing, which for me was life-changing. So Shannon, my co-author, and I were getting together where we became very good friends through an assignment when she was on my staff being my transformation advisor. And, one day we were just reminiscing about the experience we had and this very successful transformation with this amazing group of people. And we thought to ourselves, you know what? We have a really good story here, and we should really take some time to reflect on it and share it with other people who want to make business transformations, share some of the key elements and some of the struggles that we had along the way, and also inspire, that next generation of female leaders, whether they're in manufacturing or not, right? A lot of times business is a very male dominated world. And when we were growing up, we didn't necessarily have female role models that came before us. And so we're hoping through this book, we're being role models for women in manufacturing and other STEM fields and male dominated fields, where we want them to understand that they can be true to themselves and succeed. So long-winded story, but that's how it all came together.
Yeah. And I love that. element of your experience of my mom was in a male dominated field, trucking and
Oh, yeah.
logistics. And my dad also worked in that field, and she rose up through leadership as well. And I know watching her, the struggle was never something that she talked about. And
Mhm.
I think I admire that most about her is that perseverance that you have to just push through and be successful in spite of, some of these other challenges that kind of seem to be maybe an undercurrent sometimes in business. And I could see that theme throughout your book as I was reading through the different stories is you talk about kind of that barrier, but it's not something that dominated your experience. Like it was,
Right.
you didn't let that stop you. So just, I want to hear more about that and kind of hear more about kind of that approach that you seem to have persevering through that and kind of the process. Like, how did you make the decision that, I'm not going to, I'm going to succeed even though this is going on, and I'm not gonna make a big deal about it. I'm just going to push through. So I'm just really curious about that.
So I think it probably started with my interview in
Mhm.
manufacturing. And this is a story that's in the book, but I was literally 17 years old and I had just moved to a new location. My family moved from Rochester, New York to Kansas City. And so I wasn't familiar with the area. And I went to a co-op school. So you had to work 2.5 years, go to school 2.5 years, write a thesis for your undergraduate. So
Mhm.
you had to find a job, you had to find a sponsor. And I got a call from an assembly plant in Kansas City. And my dad said, "Hey, let me drive you." I'm like, "Okay." So he drives me and he doesn't stay in the parking lot. He sits in the lobby. And I go through this like, I love that man,
Love it. I love it.
4-hour interview, right? And he's sitting there in the lobby. And at the end of the interview, they said, "Would you like to take a tour?" And I said, "Sure." They go, "Well, how about that man in the lobby? Would you like to take a tour?" I'm like, "I'll ask him." So my dad and I went out on the shop floor and, this was in the 80s, much before all this movement about what's appropriate and not appropriate
Yep.
behavior has come to light. And people were hooping and hollering and catcalling. And I was literally, my elbow was intertwined within my dad's, right? So obviously I'm young
Mhm.
because who goes
Mhm.
on an interview and is like interlocked with their dad? And so when we left that environment, I was like, there is no way my dad is going to let me go work there. There is absolutely no way. And when they called and offered me the job, I said, "Hang on. Hey, dad, they offered me the job." And he's like, "Awesome. You need to take it." And I said, "Well, what about, all that cat calling and whistling and stuff?" He goes, they didn't mean anything by it. Don't let them hold you back, take the job. And so I think that's where it started because my dad,
Mhm.
brought me up to have confidence, brought me up to believe in my abilities and that I could do anything that I wanted to do. Not that I ever pictured myself in manufacturing because my parents didn't work in manufacturing, I didn't know anything about it. But when I came up against my first challenges, right, of this
Mhm.
male dominated world, he was just like, "That's their issue, not yours. Don't worry about it." And so I think that set the tone for the whole rest of my career, quite honestly, because here was this person who loved me more than anything.
Mhm.
And he didn't make an issue of it. So I was like, I'm not going to make an issue of it either. And, Amanda, I grew up with brothers. I went to engineering school. There were very small amount of women there. So for me, it was a very normal situation to be the only girl, the
Mhm.
only female, the only woman, at the table. And it was only issue for me if someone else made it an issue for me. Like I never walked into a conference room and was like, I'm the only girl here. I'm the only female here. I did enjoy the short lines at the bathroom. I will tell you that. That
Yeah.
was an advantage, the only place in life where you don't have to wait in a long line, if you're a
Right.
female.
That's hilarious.
But unless somebody says, "Oh, a female VP of ops," I've never met one of those, which I hated, even though it was, I think, meant as a compliment. I didn't like
Right.
being reduced to one aspect of my identity, right? I felt like
Exactly.
I was
Yep.
at the table because of my accomplishments.
Yep.
And sometimes, and I think this is a very familiar thing, particularly when I was younger, people tested their boundaries with
Mhm.
me between personal and professional relationships, and you just had to set your boundaries and move on, you know?
Mhm.
So luckily I wasn't at the end of anything like we hear about in the news,
Mhm.
but those were just the things that I had to cope with that I just felt like were part of life, and every job and every career has its upsides and its downsides. And there were many more upsides than downsides. And so I just chose to focus on those.
Yeah. So what I hear you say, and what I love is that you already had, it sounded like, some very clear values and boundaries around who you were and how you were going to present yourself. And your dad reinforced that for you. It sounds like, when he's like, hey, that's not about you. That's all about them, which
Mhm.
is true, right?
Right.
It's right. It's completely the truth. Um, and so you just held to those boundaries and those values that you have about yourself, and didn't sounds like just didn't let the trash kind of get in. You're just like, I'm just moving past this.
Yeah.
And that, I just love that approach. I mean, that is, and it's very genuine and authentic too. I think. I mean, you can get indignant about it, and you can. I mean, I'm sure there are times when people cross the line, and you've got to take a different approach. So I'm not saying, that it's not okay to push back, but I think what I hear you say is, you know, you never felt the need to do that because you set your boundaries pretty clearly, and you didn't tolerate that. You're just like, hey, I know what I can do, I know what I'm capable of, and I'm going to just continue to persevere and do my work. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to say that there weren't some bad or tricky things along the way. There's actually, I think, a good lesson about this. And I think we talk about this in the book a little bit, not this particular story, but relationships are so important. And I can
Mhm.
tell you a story that was very early on in my career. It was at the vehicle assembly plant. And every day at noon, we would go do a quality review of the cars, and everybody was there, the plant manager, the union leadership, almost everybody who wasn't tied to a line job was there. And we'd look at the cars, and they were bright lights, and it was just cool, right? We'd look at how
Yeah.
many cars we made the day before or what defects they were. And one of the zone committeemen in the union started making lewd gestures at me. And he did it every day for like 2 weeks. And it was like blatant and inappropriate. And I was
Mhm.
probably 19 years old at the time.
Mhm.
And I knew I wasn't the only one seeing it because there were lots of people around, right?
Mhm.
And so I got called into HR, and they said, we would like you to file a formal complaint against said committeeman. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And they said, why? And I said, well, this committeeman assaulted a supervisor 2 weeks ago.
Oh my.
And he's still, I mean, it was, but
I hear you.
pushed him,
Yep.
and he's still employed. I'm not going to fight your battles for you. I'm just going to stay away from him. So time goes on, he keeps doing it. And I'm in the industrial engineering department. And all of a sudden, 2 or 3 other union officials come in, and they did not go in the offices back in the day. This was not, as great labor relations as, we have today.
Ah.
And so everybody was looking, and they called me out in the plant. And they said, Kathy, what's going on? You don't stop by and have coffee with us anymore. Because I would come in early sometimes and go to the union
Mhm.
office and have coffee with the committeemen, because to me, I wasn't union or management. I was management, but I just was raised that people are people. And I had worked
Mhm.
in labor relations early in my career. So I had great relationships with these people. And I said, I'm afraid of, your friend here. He's making lewd gestures at me, and it's making me uncomfortable. And I said, okay. And they said, go back in. 10 minutes later, they came back with him, and they said, do you have something you'd like to say to Kathy? And he apologized and said it would not happen again. And it
Oh
didn't.
wow.
And they took care of it, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
could have gone the official route, and I'm not saying that that's not appropriate for some people in some situations.
Right.
For
Right.
me, it wasn't. I didn't want my whole rest of my career to be like, oh, Kathy sued XYZ company for harassment. I didn't want that label. I,
Right.
but when you make good relationships with people, they watch out for you, regardless
Mm-hmm.
of their role, regardless of their title. And
Mm-hmm.
that was a very powerful lesson for me very early on, that you treat people with dignity and respect, and they will watch out for you and
Mm-hmm.
help take care of you and make sure you're safe and protected. And, sometimes some of the processes just create labels for you and things that you don't necessarily want to carry.
Yeah. And at 19 years old, to have that kind of insight into the situation, like, that just blows me away. I probably wouldn't have had kind of that kind of intuition that you had at that point to very clearly see kind of, well, I understand what's going on here, and I'm not sure that's the path I want to take. So I'm sure that just set the tone for your whole career in terms of kind of how you relate to people, and like you said, the importance that you put on building those relationships in a, um, I don't know, constructive and respectful way. So kudos to you for that. That it really just blows me away.
Oh, thanks, Amanda.
So let's talk a little bit more about kind of how you progress through your manufacturing experience. And I know we've talked a little bit about kind of lean. We kind of mentioned that. So just for the listeners here, give kind of a brief description of what lean is in the manufacturing world.
Yeah. So lean is really the Toyota production system. It's been in existence for decades now. And what it is you're producing customer value with the least amount of waste and the highest quality. And sometimes that means converting from batch manufacturing, where you create a lot of things and put them in a pile and push them through. And eventually
Mm-hmm.
what the customer wants comes out at the other end. In lean, you're pulling value through, sometimes with single piece flow or small batches at the rate of their demand. So what it does is it reduces the lead time and allows you to be more responsive to the customer. And it's not just a manufacturing concept. I've
Mm-hmm.
used it, in all kinds of businesses, in the offices in manufacturing and all of the processes. So many of our processes in business are waste, right? At handoffs or things waiting to be processed, or there's all kinds of concepts. So this particular example of this process implementation is in manufacturing, but it's pretty applicable to all
Mm-hmm.
businesses. It's a mindset and a way of processing what the customer wants.
Mm-hmm. I imagine it would be challenging too to go into an organization where, we've done it this way. Joe has brought me these parts at this time every day for the last 30 years, kind of deal. And I just pulled that example kind of from your book, but
Yep.
I can imagine the work that you have to do on the change management and the psychology side of it. It really, I mean, the process is probably easy to figure out and define. Is getting the people to buy in and be a participant in the whole kind of effort to make the change. So just talk a little bit about that. That had to have been incredibly challenging.
Well, it is, right? But that's really where Shannon and my niche really lies.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have tons of perseverance and persistence. Um, you have to articulate the vision for people who haven't seen something that's run that way. I've done this many times in many businesses and many plants and many organizations all over the world now. And there's one thing that is a sure bet. When I come in and say, I'm going to help you, or I'm leading this and this is how we're going to do things, people always say, always, 100%, we're unique, different, and special, and this doesn't apply to us.
Mm-hmm.
I've literally never had a team or a leader of a team that I'm not leading not say that. It's been 100%. I should, start betting people on that. So people just don't feel that, that sort of change. And can sometimes be pretty radical to how they're doing business is going to help them, particularly if they've been successful in their traditional way. This is just going to help them be more successful, get better results, those types of things. So you have to articulate the vision, the boundaries. You have to be persistent. When things go wrong, you can't blame or shame people, right? You have to use it as learning experiences. You have to spend a lot of time where the work is done with the team to understand their challenges and help them overcome it. You have to remove people from the business who are going to undermine the change. Everybody has time in my worlds. Everybody has time to get a seat on the bus, right? But after a certain amount of time, if you're going to undermine or work against it, I can't let one person create failure for a whole team of people. So that has to happen sometimes. That's not necessarily fun, but you don't have to do it with a lot of people for people to get the message. So yeah, I mean, I've had people blatantly roll their eyes at me, the stories, it's just amazing. But when you get people, what's interesting is in traditional manufacturing, and I think we're getting away from this in general as manufacturing culture. It's a very command and control thing where you do what I say, right? So we take advantage of people's hands, but not their hearts and minds. So it takes a while to win over their hearts and minds. And when you give them an opportunity to contribute with their ideas, and they see that you value them as a person, you value their ideas, you're going to use their ideas. If you can't use their ideas, you tell them why you can't use their ideas, and their jobs and lives become easier. It takes on a whole life of itself. So once you kind of get past that flipping point, it's actually momentum that you can't stop. And it's positive and it's amazing. And it's not that every day is a picnic or Disney World, right? Like I can promise you again, 100%. I'm a planner. So I would have a plan for my day. And the goal was to see how long I could go in my day to the plan before some unplanned catastrophe happened that I would have to address. But, as you train your people and you give them these skills and, you have to participate in a lot less of the problems because they know how to address them. They know you trust them to address them. And they're saying, look, this is my responsibility and accountability. I'm not just doing what you told me to do, even though I knew it was stupid, Yeah.
And I think what I love about that is it really can be applied in any kind of situation. It's any kind of change management's going to be that, like you said, changing hearts and minds, but, recognizing the people as individuals, valuing their contribution and just having that open communication with them. And then they have a lot more ownership of their job and of, what they're doing. I wonder how many times has somebody come to you and say, I hated this whole process in the beginning, but now, they're loving their job. They're loving what they're doing. I mean, there was probably a lot of stories like that where there was just significant transformations in a person's attitude toward their job and what they do.
So much of that, it's hard to even, quantify. You still have some people who just want to come in and, press the buttons and go home and not, engage like that, save their energy for other places. But the vast majority do that. And I think, Amanda, what's in my career, and I look back at what's been most rewarding to me, is not just their attitudes changing toward their job, but I've seen so many people grow and develop and achieve things they never thought were possible or saw in themselves because of these opportunities. People who went back to school and got degrees, people who were team leaders who are now running plants, right? And just them having the opportunity to explore what talents and gifts they have to bring to the world. And for me, you don't find any of that on my resume, but to me, those are the biggest accomplishments that I feel like I've had in my career, is seeing things in people and giving them the chance to explore them.
Absolutely. Well, and that really, I think, points to your interest in psychology and people development, and that combination of your math and science brain with the positive psychology, I guess, brain. I don't know if they're both on the same sides of the brain or not, but it seems like kind of a unique combination, but it sounds like that was kind of the perfect match for you to really use your gifts and talents to help these companies transform. So I want to hear a little bit more about this positive psychology degree, because I remember when you and I talked, way back a year or so ago, you were, I think, just finishing up the program, maybe writing your thesis or something.
Yeah.
And it was a newer field. So I'm just tell people about what it is, what is the study of, and then how you're using that now in your business.
So, when I was really going through this journey of deciding what I wanted to go back and do, I was reading a lot of books, and I found that all of the books that were just giving me energy and wanting to come out of my seat, just bounding with joy, led back to this field of positive psychology. And so I applied at Penn, and the founder of, and he's known as the father of positive psychology, Dr. Martin Seligman. He's turning 80 this year, and he still teaches there. He was one of my professors. Started this, and he tells the story of, traditional psychology was about illness or psychosis or, things that needed to be fixed in the brain. And someone challenged him once and said, well, why can't you take those concepts and take somebody who's, fine and help them thrive, right? Like have them to the right of neutral. And so he founded this he was president of the American Psychological Association years ago. And so he assembled researchers and practitioners all over the world to research the science of thriving. So I studied that for a year. The first semester was about the theories, and the research and getting to know all of that. And then the second half was how you apply it. So my thesis was, of course, in manufacturing. I did research on how businesses can get better results through positive workplace relationships, optimism, and creating opportunities for meaningful work. And so I think that I had done a lot of those things as a leader intuitively, but now I'm armed with the science and the research that backs it. And it shows that, you can get results with these positive concepts and helping people thrive along the way. It doesn't have to be miserable. It doesn't have to be command and control and check your brain at the door,
Yeah.
And so now I have some of the research behind it to back it. And I'm teaching managers and individuals in and around business some of these things that I wish someone had told me, earlier in my career that I sometimes had to learn the hard way. And there's just so many tools, and it's just so energizing and gratifying. I, decided not to return to the corporate world, but to work with companies that really want to get results through these positive means.
And manufacturing, I guess, besides agriculture, is probably one of our oldest industries. And so it seems like it's taken the longest time to transform the culture. You talked a little bit about that, how you see that culture in manufacturing shifting a bit from maybe what it was in the 30s, 40s, 60s, 70s, and 80s to what it is today. Tell me about some of the changes that you're seeing. And I'm sure it's not an across the board. I'm sure company.
Yeah, it varies quite a bit depending on, what plant or company you go. Even within a company, there's a lot of variation. And you can have people apply the processes and the tools, right, that come out from corporate. Many times, these concepts of lean and visual controls and people valuing safety and those sorts of things, they come out. But there's a lot of variation in terms of them being embraced. And that has a lot to do with the leader. The top leader and the rest of the leadership team through there. I'm getting a lot of traction working with team leaders and first line supervisors. A lot of people do executive coaching, and I do that as well. But when you think about it, team leaders and supervisors are the closest to the people who do the value added work, who literally produce what it is that makes your company money. They have so much influence, and they don't necessarily get the development and support that people who rise to the top do.
Mhm.
And you think about that, that's kind of backwards, right? Because they're affecting all the people who are being productive and making the money for the company. So I'm getting a lot of good traction with that layer of management and just helping them understand, hey, here are your strengths. Here's
Mhm.
what optimism can do for you. Here's some
Mhm.
resilience skills,
Mhm.
so that they can create those environments. So I think that, again, it varies a lot. I think that the pandemic is going to help accelerate that because, the great resignation, people realize they have choices, they want work-life balance, they want to be treated with dignity and respect. And whatever this movement is that allowed people to kind of get back to their roots and their values,
Mhm.
um, I think is going to help accelerate more plants taking on these more inclusive cultures.
Yeah, and that's great. And I'm a consultant as well. And I would say that my experience is kind of spot on what you're saying is, you pluck somebody out of, you know, um, a day-to-day worker, you pluck them out because they're an excellent performer and you put them into a team leader position. And then we really don't do anything else with them and teach them how to lead this team that they don't necessarily have, hiring and firing power, but they've got to influence these people to do their jobs every day. And we don't do enough to develop their ability to influence them. And they're the ones that if they're not on the bus, of whatever, corporate wants to do, it's not going to happen very well down at the,
It's
staff
not going to
level.
happen. You're
Yeah.
spot on.
Yeah. So it is a huge need, I think, and any company that has kind of an operational nature, maybe not just manufacturing, but
Right.
any kind of like operational nature, call center,
Mhm.
processing, things, that come in. I think it's the same thing. And I just love that you're doing this work and you're making a difference. You're making a difference for these companies and I love to see that. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. It's very rewarding.
I bet. I bet. So if I was somebody that wanted to connect with you and learn more about what you do and how I might be able to use your consulting services, how would they connect with you?
Two ways I would say. LinkedIn. I'm Kathy Miller, which is the world's most common name. But I'm Kathy Miller, MAP, MBA, CEG.
Okay.
So you can look me up, KATHY Miller, exactly as it sounds, MAP, MBA, CEG. Or Shannon and I have a website,
Mhm.
opsisters.com. It's OPSISTERS.com. And there's a link on there to get in touch with me and Shannon.
Okay, great. And then also your book is available in the VIP Center bookstore and it's also available through your website. So I'd encourage people to pick it up. It is very fascinating. It reads like a novel, the way that you've kind of read it. I feel like it reads like a novel. And even though didn't have a manufacturing background, the story is fascinating. I just found it I'd start reading it and be like, oh, it's an hour later. I found it very compelling. If you're in the business world, I think there's a lot of relative stories and experiences here that people can pull out. So I will include your LinkedIn and your website in our comments so people can get connected with you. So thanks so much for talking with me today, Kathy.
Thanks, Amanda. It's been great.